Okay, everybody, we're ready to kick off our next session. If you'd have a seat, we would appreciate that. He's got the hard stuff. All right, do you have a mic over there?
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody do me a favor and close those doors. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. I want to introduce Randy Teal. He's the Executive Vice President of Device Processing for Apcudo. Apcudo is another automation company that has a combination of software and robotics that can help simplify the space. You can do anything from grade up level improvements that will net in better device resale values, consistency in grading, consistency in outcomes, and just give you even things like instant scalability, because with the combination of the software and robotic automation, somebody comes along and says, hey, I need someone to process another 50,000 devices a month. You don't have to worry about hiring anybody to do that. The automation tools will give you that ability. So we're going to have a little fireside chat here. I'm just going to pepper him with questions, and then at the end we'll wrap up with a little bit of questions and answer for the rest of the audience. So would you give a nice hand to Randy?
Thanks, Bob. Very happy to be here. This is a very nice, casual setting.
Yes, thank you. Try and keep it relaxed and casual, Want to have fun with it, too. So.
My only requirement was not to stand up at a podium and preach. So.
You didn't want to stand at a podium?
No, this is much better.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah. My 62-year-old legs think it's much better, too. Yeah, I can use the break.
There you go.
Sit down for a little bit. So I apologize. We're having some difficulty with one of our screens here, so I'm working off of this a little bit. So you'll bear with me if you don't mind, as I kind of stay on track here and make sure that we cover the topics that we're planning to discuss here today. What would you do? Well, let me do this. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Bob LaFawn. I'm one of the founders of this conference, and I'm also a co-founder and managing partner with Capital Growth Partners. We're a business advisory firm. But that's enough about me. I want to let Randy have a chance to introduce himself. He's got a much more fascinating background than I do. He's also a lot smarter than me because he's done things I don't understand. And then he can tell you a little bit about his organization. So, all right, you are on the stage, Randy. Tell everybody about yourself.
Awesome, great. I apologize if I'm not looking at you guys very often, but
keep the mic close.
That's quite a stretch. So, anyways, yeah. So my name is Randy Teal. Currently Executive Vice President at Apcudo. I lead the device processing business unit. So wherever we have installed our automation platform and robotics, we have a site. We do a hands-on management process. And my responsibility is making sure those sites are working as intended, taking care of our customers, processing as many devices as possible.
Yes, and you do have an exhibit here so people can come over and learn a little bit more about the organization as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Give us a little history prior to coming to Apcudo.
Yeah, so going way back, at the beginning, I was 5. No, I'm just kidding. I was prior service military. I did 6 years in the Army. I went to business school and took a couple of corporate jobs. First started in this industry back in 2014, 2015. I was actually at Apple, working in Apple Care, and we had an excess of broken phones, KBB phones, and we're trying to figure out what to do with it. Kind of developed a plan for how we could introduce certified pre-owned and also as is. Pitched it to the COO, and like 2 days later, I was divested of my current team and tasked with forming a refurb team for AppleCare. And that was, like I said, 2014, 2015. So we were talking iPhone 5, 5S, and spent a lot of time there and really built out that program to what it is today. I left Apple at the end of 2021 and went to GameStop, of all places. So I know meme stock darling.
So you were the reason that stock went through the roof like that?
Yes.
That was all you? Okay.
Yeah. No. But actually, that was fascinating because it was a really nice juxtaposition from working at Apple, which is, let's face it, it's a giant conglomerate, very corporate, a lot of volume. We used to look at projects and be like, well, is it going to save us less than $10 million, I don't want to talk about it, to GameStop, where not profitable. And I was tasked with leading the refurbishment business unit. And it was really fascinating because it was another look at the secondhand market, not just consoles, most people don't know, but GameStop also was focused on mobility and iPhone devices. Big store footprint, online trade-in, and really advanced my understanding of what happens once you leave those four walls of an OEM or a major carrier, and really helped kind of refine my understanding of what is the best way to make this industry perform better, more profitable, and more accessible to folks.
I'm personally glad you made that move, because one of the things that we've been looking for are different people to help professionalize the space. And there are a lot of really smart, talented people in the space now more than ever before, but we need more people like you to come into the space, help us figure out these problems, apply data analytics, apply automation, apply technology, and help us take it to the next level so that it continues to remain viable.
Absolutely.
So.
Partially why I like my position at Apkudo. We are not traders. We are not looking at the buy-sell side specifically. We are focused on how do we make customers and folks within the space able to perform better, reduce their costs, get a better accessibility to the data, make better decisions, and ultimately, as you streamline an industry that has a lot of fragmentation and a lot of players in it, you reap the benefits of opportunity to improve profits and make the processes more scalable.
And speaking of data, now that's a common theme. If you were in any of the earlier sessions, we've already talked about data a good bit, and we're going to continue to talk about data because data is going to inform your decision going forward. It really will. It's not going to be about just buying right and selling right. Data is going to inform your decisioning. And it's not just about the price points and the margins, as I said. There's a lot more to know about that data. And that was one of the things that we discussed with Randy was we said we really think that this is an important topic. You guys deal with data analytics every single solitary day. So we thought this was a great opportunity. Instead of coming in and saying, hey, let's talk about robotics, for example, you can learn about that later, but let's talk about what data means to all of you, especially if you're business owners, and what impact that can have on your operation and your organization. So can you give us some examples about where data has been particularly transformative in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the reality is robotics or whatever it is you're using for grading or even the trade-in, and we all know, do you ask 10 questions or you ask one? The reality is the data is what's required to drive the decision-making. I'll give you an example, and this is not specifically related to robotics, although the client that we worked with, it did involve a piece of hardware, which I think we'll see kind of thematically, especially as you see other speakers and the like kind of discussing the robotics, the automation. That is the way you capture the data. The reality is the value is where that sits on the platform and how do you utilize it. So I'll give you an example. We had and this is not directly related to automation, but we had a client who was suffering. They had a large retail footprint. They were suffering from basically theft and loss and shrinkage as mobility devices were moving from the stores to their warehouse. It was a very large problem, $20, $30 million problem for them. And so it's one thing to kind of say, okay, let's map the data, identify where the losses are, but that's just helps you understand what is your actual shrinkage. What we were able to do is, one, introduce a piece of hardware, so a camera and a scale, so you can do the open box and the closed box. But the real power for AI, machine learning, and leveraging the data wasn't just, I've got these boxes, here's where my shrinkage is. It was actually taking that data and saying, okay, we had X amount of shrinkage. What route was that on? What store did that originate from? And what DC did it actually go towards? And thousands of packages shipping every week. As you start to build out that data, we started writing a machine learning model, AI type of algorithm that would actually capture, as we were capturing all that data, all the open box, all the closed box data, we were able to kind of use AI, use the machine learning to identify where the risk was in those routes. And so we actually developed for our customer basically a grading scale between 0 and 4, and they were able to look at the specific retail stores, they were able to look at the DCs, And then, frankly, they were able to look at all the shipping routes and the carriers, and using a model, develop what that risk factor was for each one of those areas.
That's interesting.
So the customer is able to basically capture that data, highlight where the issues were, drive retraining, and make some process changes. And I think it was $28 million. The following quarter, I think their losses were like 40,000.
Wow, okay. So when you look at data and you think, how do I monetize this? Sometimes people are thinking of upfront. So how do I improve my margins? How do I make more money? But if you're able to save companies money on that back end using that data and identifying problems, saving that money, that's still the same net effect. You're keeping more of your money, right? And so that's something you shouldn't look past, is what happens on the back end of the business, not just the front side. Can you give other examples of how data can be monetized?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes back to what data do you have and how do you actually utilize the data, right? And the reality is customers, anyone that's in this space, you're using data to some extent. Data drives decision making. What we see in the spaces today, and I lived through this, we kind of talked about GameStop, but as you look at customers, it's one thing to have access to the data, and most people do, and most people do their best to make data-driven decisions. A lot of the work in this industry, though, is happening on Excel, right? And so it's one thing to have certain point-of-sale data. It's really important for customers to understand where am I making assumptions to drive that margin analysis or drive that monetization piece, and where do I actually have hard data that I can trust and verify. And then there's the secondary challenge of, is my data coming from disparate sources? Do I have data in a WMS system? Do I have data at a point of sale space? How feasible is it for us to be able to look at that data in combination and able to drive certain decisions?
Let's water it down even a little bit more. And I don't know the demographic of everybody in this room necessarily, but I'm going to assume there may be some people in here who, yes, they're using Excel. Their business is a little bit more simple in the sense that they go to different auction sites, they buy devices, they have different sellers that they're going to send those lists to try and move the product. So they may not have a lot of data other than they know what they bought it for, they know what they're selling it for, they know what the general market prices are. So for that more fundamental mom and pop type of operation, can you water that down just a little bit to say, okay, here's how this data is going to inform your decisioning, and here's how this data can help put more money in your pocket, net, one way or another, on the front side or the back side?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and I'd be curious, I won't do a show of hands, but I'm sure everybody in here, if they're on the buying side or the selling side, mom and pop or corporate, there's often an Excel template involved. If it's not in your inbox, somebody mailed it to you. That is great. I appreciate how flexible Excel can be. But the reality is, if you're able to, and let's take a mom and pop, for example, right? And so maybe you're doing trade-in, you're doing processing yourself, and you're also trying to sell out. If you are able to understand that trade-in data and understand what was wrong with the phone, what was stated that was wrong with the phone, as you bring it back to your warehouse, you run it through some automation and do the actual grading in a consistent, concise manner, and then you're able to put it back into retail. There's obviously returns there. As you start to look at that data, and if you can tie it all together, and the most common denominator for phones is typically the IMEI, but it could be the serial number as well. But if you're able to link all that data together versus, let me look at my point of sale data, let me look at my warehouse WMS grading data and my sellout data, as you start to string that all together, what you can see is you start to see which data points are important at each. And if I understand where I'm monetizing well on the retail side, and I can walk that back to the correct profile and confidence in the data that I've extracted from the device processing, walk that back into the trade-in, and now you can start to even sharpen the pencil on how much you're actually willing to pay for a trade, or at least understanding what it's going to cost to transform that.
Okay. Is there any other way we should be thinking about data? Anything differently?
Yeah, there's definitely, certainly a lot of different frameworks that could be utilized. when you think about data today, there's really kind of three elements to it. So one, what data do you actually readily have access to? What data are you missing? And the standard format for how you deal with that is you create assumptions, right? So understanding what data you have, understanding what assumptions you have to make or where you're missing data, where that assumption, if I could convert that into actual data or something that I can rely on, then your ability to predict becomes that much more powerful. The second one is the quality of the data. So is that data that was assessed by a person sitting at the end of the line, or has it been created and auto-generated in a consistent and accurate manner so that I can have confidence in what that data actually does? The third part then is, do you have the ability to map those two data points together? And a lot of that comes back to how do you set up your data within your own facility? Do I have a product hierarchy that allows me to aggregate it together? Do I have to stitch it together? And once you've got it, and once you have that put together and you understand what your assumptions are, then you have to step back and think about, what is this data actually telling me? You may have an answer, or you may be trying to derive an answer. How much do I want to sell it for? It's a good one. But more importantly is, what are the aspects of that data that allow me to make better decisions, not just on how much am I going to sell it for, where am I going to sell it? Do I understand the best downstream use of that device? What region should it go to? Does it need work? Does it not? How do you actually drive that monetization? And a lot of that comes back to stable, consistent data and being able to see, in theory, from where the phone originated to where you actually want it to go so that it can get into the next person's hands and achieve that second or sometimes third or fourth life now.
Okay. So what would you say in terms of, let's say I'm an operator and I've got a traditional buyback and resell business. I want to start paying attention to the data. I want it to become trusted data that really does inform my decision going forward. Any recommendations on the best way to start doing that?
Yeah, I maybe give a little bit of an example. We were actually was working with a client right as I started at Apkudo, and they were working through a potentially acquisition and using some of our automation. As we started to build that business case, we really helped work with them to walk back and understand how their business had grown and changed over the previous year, which gave them volume to really need that. And I'll be honest, as we started to look at it, what they realized was the profitability of the segment they had started with versus the profitability of the new segment was actually quite a bit different. And so we started walking through models with them and leveraging our data and some anecdotes as far as what we see in the marketplace for wholesale and sellout and the like. And at the end of the day, they looked at it and didn't feel like they were going to be able to monetize this new part of the business that they were expanding to.
Okay.
And so, while we didn't actually sign them up as a client, we felt very good that we had helped walk them through their business process, utilizing our data and bringing in some incremental data to show them how it could work, for them to realize that wasn't maybe the best move for them. But at the end of the day, it's about making sure that the customer gets what they need.
Sure.
What we can do to help.
Well, that's an important point. Can you help me understand a little bit more about kind of the framework for that? Maybe some case studies or specific client examples. You don't necessarily need to say the name of a client, but maybe some actual live examples of how you've been able to put that data to use for some of the clients you've worked with over the years.
Yeah, so typically it comes back to kind of that maturity model, right?
Okay.
And so, we specialize in automation, consistent processing, and accuracy for the products. That obviously creates a foundation for the good utilization of data. Make this louder. So a good utilization of data. More importantly is where that data goes. And so developing a platform, being able to integrate not just the data that exists, say, in the warehouse or on your WMS system, but also being able to tie in trade-in data and those KPIs and results and fold that in as well, followed by how do we help the sales team actually sell out. And we've done this a few times. Whether you're whether you're taking trade-in or you're actually purchasing devices for processing, that consistency of the grading, that level of detail that you can actually capture for the processing, and then understanding how that fits into your monetization program. Where should you sell it? What needs to be done to it? Is it eligible to go to e-com or wholesale? Does it need to go to repair house, or maybe it goes to an R2 vendor? We do this with our clients often, right? Some of it is our data, so we're capturing on our automation. Some of it is helping the customers or clients integrate data that they have from other systems, whether it's a point of sale system or purchasing or even the sellout side. And we have seen, in a world where you're a trader and 5 or 6 points of margin is not a bad thing, being able to double that is a significant impact to your business.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. We get phone calls regularly, Capital Growth Partners, from people saying, hey, margin compression's hurting us. We need to source more volume. Can you help us? Now, of course, being the wise guy I am, I always tell them, no, go buy a grocery store instead if that's how they want to make a living. High volume and low margin. That's not the most attractive business in the world. A little aside that I want to talk about that you just made me think about on this. My company does representation for businesses that are looking to buy other companies or sell other companies and sometimes raise capital. Every single client we talk to that wants to buy another business or sell another business, at some point in time in the conversation, we're going to start asking them about their data. And if you don't have data, reliable, trusted data, the discussion's done. Because unless you have patented processes, technologies, things of that nature, even if you have strong EBITDA, earnings before income tax and depreciation of asset, in other words, profit, you don't have contracts, you don't have anything that's repeatable, so you don't necessarily have a business that's sellable or even a business that you would want to buy. So one of the things you need to be doing is tracking that data, developing reliable, consistent data that's predictable, that can be used, again, to inform your decisioning, so that if someone's looking to buy your organization, let's say you're my age and you decide, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to sell, I don't have a kid to hand off the business to. One of the things that a buyer's going to look at is your historical data, right? And they're going to ask you, where did that sourcing come from? How is it being tracked? And if you can't give good information to that, then you're going to have a hard time selling. And maybe what you do is wind up selling the assets and not the liabilities, and having to walk away with next to nothing in your pocket for all that effort. So I can tell you right now, from a financial perspective, data is everything. It's not just making more margin right now. It's how you future-proof your business. It's how you prepare yourself for an exit. So if you're not on board with data now, get on board sooner rather than later. I can tell you, because I play in this mergers and acquisition space every single day. We have people coming to us asking about it. So we ask certain fundamental questions, and it's going to come back to the data. Where did you get it from? How are you tracking it? We want to know the reliability of it. So that's something I just want to throw out there, because I think it's such an important element that's overlooked by a lot of people.
Just want to clarify, you're not going to leave us anytime soon, right?
I hope not.
He started with the, if I get sick of it.
Oh, no, I was giving an example. If I was,
Yeah.
I have no business I'm looking to sell.
Good.
Yeah, no, nothing like that. No.
I mean, all I can say is it kind of echoing that. So there's there's 2 or 3 pieces to that, right? So one, your data needs to be obviously accurate and reliable, which we kind of talked about. To your point, when you think about like the maturity of the business and maturity model for how you're leveraging your data, there's a lot of different elements to it. So one, are you able to cull disparate data from different systems together so that you can look at it from a seamless end-to-end perspective? And again, in our world, the most common denominator is typically the IMEI or the serial number, but you still have to build a hierarchy on top of that. I can't tell you how many times you can dump 1 million records in something, but if you don't have a product hierarchy to be able to aggregate it up, you're not going to get the insights that you want out of it.
Yeah.
So one, can you string that data together? Can you get it into a consistent platform? 2, how reliable is that data? So again, and I see this all the time, I'm sure you do as well, as phones move from entity to entity in our space, there's not always a lot of trust that what grade you said it was, or even how you graded it, is going to match up with that same person's grade. If you have consistent data and you can kind of translate what that looks like, from a functional perspective, from a cosmetic perspective, and have that data be reliable, not just for your own internal needs, but also for your downstream customer, that's really important. So we talked about the quality of data. We talked about the ability to aggregate the data. We need to talk about the ability to have a good product hierarchy that allows you to gain those insights, spin the data in different directions. The third piece I talk about, and you kind of mentioned the reliability as well. Everybody here, myself included, and I do it every day, you look at your data, but you also have assumptions that you're making that help you rationalize the data and fill in the gaps that you're missing. That's great, and someone like Bob or myself who maybe been in this business for 20 or 25 years, we can make that assumption potentially with some decent level of reliability, but the reality is there's nothing better than factual data instead of an assumption.
Yeah, take the speculation out of it.
And it's
make it about
really
facts.
important as you think about using data in your business that not only are you creating data that you can trust and you're putting it into a format that makes sense to you, but you should be looking at where are the gaps that I'm using assumptions to fill in, and how do I go get that data more reliably and make sure that it's more accurate.
Yeah, so you move away from things like Excel spreadsheets and you get into software where you have dashboards and reporting. And the software will do that tracking and calculation for you. So that's the modernization of the space. Those are the things that people need to start embracing if they're going to be able to determine a path or track record of truly reliable data. Is there anything else in that framework that we haven't covered that we should discuss?
Yeah, well, I think the next logical step beyond that, right, is so I've got data, it's reliable, I've minimized my assumptions, or at least I've got some data that's backing that up. The reality is that next step, that next evolution is machine learning and utilizing the AI learning models and capabilities.
For the benefit of the audience, would you talk a little bit about how AI and machine learning work together so that they can kind of connect the dots if they're not familiar with those two phrases?
Yeah, I mean, the machine learning, basically, it's, I don't know, maybe think of it a step down as AI, but machine learning is you're entering specific parameters, and then you're basically training the machine by exposing it to many sources.
So through repetition, it
through
learns.
repetition, whereas the AI piece, there's an element of that, but the computer is able to basically derive some of those insights and continue to evolve and learn based on the data that it sees. So one is training the computer, the other one is using the computer to help you gain insights and understand what it is you're looking at from a data perspective.
Yeah, that's really useful. And one of the things that happens is over time, I don't care how well we're trained. I mean, we're two veteran guys here. We could be trained on the same grading process, for example. And no matter how thoroughly we're being trained, we still may interpret that differently. And that creates a problem, doesn't it? There's inconsistency in performance because of our interpretation.
It is. And I mean, not necessarily intending to talk about grading and how it works today, but
yeah, just as an example.
You make a great point. And I did this at Apple, and I did it at GameStop, and it's very easy to prove. But you can line up 3 or 4 experts, and I say experts, people that have graded thousands and thousands of devices. The accuracy between the 3 people is typically going to be max of about 80%. And so even your best done manually, you get about an 80% accuracy factor. When you put that into an automation format, you may not always like the output because you're manual looking at it and saying, well, that's not how I would grade it. But that automation allows you to take the same picture, measure the scratches, measure the dents and the dings, write an algorithm, whether it's machine learning or AI, kind of next gen, which is what we're working on. You can actually correctly interpret it based on that digital footprint. Then the challenge to the customers just becomes, how do I get you comfortable that the manual grading that you assigned was converted correctly to a digital footprint? And once you have that, the consistency is there.
Well, from a data perspective, if I'm looking at this as a business owner and I'm using all these different automation tools and I can start seeing that we're improving the average sale price of devices and we're having fewer returns, that data is helping inform me of what's going well in the business and where there's still room to improve. And a lot of people don't have the ability to track that right now. So
absolutely,
that's where I think data has a lot of value, is being able to get to a point where it's predictable. You can see what's working and what's not, and know that double down on what's working and stop doing what's not working, right? So that's informing your decisioning.
Well, and I want to pick up on a thread that you mentioned there, talking about returns. This is a great example. So, kind of opening up the discussion, we were talking about our client who was having shrinkage on the way into their warehouse, how we use the artificial intelligence and machine learning to basically help drive some of that predictability. Something like return management, and I don't know if we've got any e-com players here, but if you're one big driver of the economics for e-commerce in the secondhand space is what's the percentage of returns, right? Imagine, if you will, that as those returns come back, you're able to reanalyze those devices, understand what exactly was wrong with those devices over and over again, and with a machine learning model built into the platform, it will be able to start advising you on, hey, when you see these functional failures or you see this cosmetic profile through your device processing, the percentage chance that that's going to get returned is a lot higher than this one. And that can drive very meaningful, very economically meaningful results, and allows you to make those adjustments.
Yeah. No, I think that's part. I think that's part of how you kind of future-proof your business and put some safety nets in place is by having that kind of reliable data that shows you where your liabilities are. So, if you can indulge me in one other thing too, I'm looking at a friend of mine who's sitting in the back corner of the room here. So I'll see if he actually starts to pay attention now. He's laughing at me. They're one of our sponsors. They play in the managed mobility space. All right. Another friend of mine that's here is in that same space as well. These organizations work with major corporations and deal with tens of thousands of devices that are deployed. How important do you think it is for a major corporation to be able to have access to dashboards and see data in real time? It's everything for them. So if you're in the buyback space and you want to start getting devices from enterprises and start grading and reselling those devices, you better have those kind of capabilities in-house, because those companies aren't even going to entertain a discussion with you if you can't talk to them in real time about data, the reliability of that data, give them dashboards in real time, and show them what's going on with their devices. So that's another thing, because enterprise is going to be part of our focus this afternoon. And if you want to play in that space, that's the next big frontier, okay? The consumer space where we've been getting right now, it's buying from carrier auctions, buying from insurance company auctions, and then reselling it. That's passe, it's a commodity. Everybody's doing it, everybody's struggling to make it work, and it's not working. So the next frontier is going to be getting into the enterprise channels. But you will not succeed if you don't have the data readily available to you that you can show your customers, all right? So I know that because I know enough about what both of those guys do. I couldn't do their jobs, but I know enough about it to know that that data is everything for them. So if you want to start playing in the enterprise channels, you better step up and embrace data for all that it's worth, not just to inform your decisioning, but to give your customers confidence that you're an organization they can deal with.
I think that's a really good point, and I guess I would say fully agree. The table stakes to get into enterprise level with that volume, the good news is more data or more volume gives you more data, but I fully agree with you, and that's one of like the focuses of a platform. It's one thing to sell some automation and robotics. How you're able to aggregate that data, how you're able to display it from whether it's real-time requirements from the customer or weekly reporting and the like, super important. The thing I would kind of highlight is it comes from the same place as we talked about with the mom and pops. If they're better able to manage their data and utilize that to gain business insights for margin improvement, it's really the same game. It's just on a different scale. And at the end of the day, creating that platform for the data for enterprise, you have to have it to get in. But like you said, if you're struggling to make money, the first thing you should be doing is going back through and doing an analysis of how good is the data that you have, where am I making those assumptions, am I able to actually use that data to create some insights and understand where am I not as profitable as I could be, where am I spending more money than I should be, et cetera. All of that is driven by data. Yes, it starts from how you ingest the data, but at the end of the day, how you manipulate and manage it is really important.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking again, if my two friends here, Mark and Billy, if somebody's approaching them and saying, hey, we'd like to buy your client's devices, process and resell and revenue share with you or whatever, they're not even going to entertain a conversation with you if you can't talk to them about all the data analytics that are of concern to them and concern to their clients. Because processing and resale is a dime a dozen. Anybody can do that. So, any recommendations you can make to the audience about next steps and how they can start to move forward and embrace data and put it to use in their business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, there's different levels of kind of maturity models around utilizing data. Everybody's got one. I think the reality is, when we talk about data-driven decision making, it's certainly not unique to our space, right? Every industry does that. But just to kind of wrap up, and again, this is something that we've done for our clients, whether they end up choosing us or somewhere else, but understanding your data footprint. What do you have? Where is it at? How is it aggregated? Can I aggregate it? What do I need to do in order to start to pull that data from disparate sources together? And you've heard me talk about it several times now, but understanding where you're making assumptions that have significant sensitivity to the output that you're looking for, whether it's profitability or cost or the like. But understanding those assumptions, understanding how you arrived at those assumptions, what is the underlying data that if I could eliminate that assumption and turn it into a fact, is really important. I think, and so once you've identified the data you have, once you've identified the data you're missing, then it comes back to whether you're a mom and pop or a big enterprise customer, having those conversations with your IT department or whoever your decision scientist person is, and understanding how can I get that data into a single entity. Can I drive a platform? Dashboards is a great example, right, for a snapshot of running the business. But how do I actually get that data pulled together? And then it's kind of the starting point, but also the ending point. I have the data. Let's say I've got it aggregated. What are the problems that I'm trying to address? And how does that data, or how do those decisions map back to the data that I have or the data that I'm missing? Can I actually go and source data, whether it's pricing data or something else, in order to add that into my business model and address those KPIs?
Excellent. That's an excellent point. All right. As we get ready to close up here and do a little question and answer session, anything else we didn't cover that you think is germane to the discussion?
No, I'm ready to open up the questions.
All right. Then how about we do this? I'm going to run around with the microphone just because I need to stretch my legs. So, what questions do we have from the audience that we can direct to our speaker here? All right. See if I can jump off the stage without hurting myself, Billy. There we go.
Hey, Randy. So I know y'all talked a ton about data as far as data integrity after the fact. And you mentioned a little bit about machine learning and AI. What are y'all doing from a predictive analytics standpoint, right? So helping, some of these smaller companies maybe drive more opportunities, right? Because I notice a lot in this space, it's very reactive, right? The customer will come and say, hey, I got 1,000 devices I need to recycle or whatever, to where if you could have predicted in the market, right, maybe 3 months beforehand, you could have said, hey, this iPhone 12 is now at an all-time high at, $250. Go ahead and recycle. It's good for the next 15 days, right? So when I think about machine learning and AI, that's what I think about, right, that generative AI piece. So are y'all starting to play in that space? And then how can the smaller companies start kind of looking for that as well as you're thinking about growing revenue, EBITDA, things of that, right? Just growing opportunities.
I'm going to let you do this. That was such a great question.
I know, that was a good question. Yeah, I think I agree with you. And you're right, and maybe that was something we should have tweaked, but the discussion we've had at this point is kind of backwards looking, right? Like, okay, I have the data. How do I utilize it moving forward? I think to your point, and the AI and machine learning models can help with this, creating a predictive model. Pricing is a good example, which you just brought up. But even as far as using the AI for the grading algorithms or the trading algorithms, like understanding those grades that you're getting, being able to push that forward. I think to your point, if you're understanding the pricing curve, which everybody probably has one, there's some are better than others, right? But understanding that pricing curve, which you have used through either traditional forecasting models or some kind of predictive AI, but being able to map that back to the data that you already have as far as how do I make predictions around the B's and the C's, or what I'm actually taking in, and to your point, starting to look at how is that going to affect my revenue moving forward? I mean, I guess we're only in June, so we got another 4 or 5 weeks before everybody starts thinking about what's going to happen in September, October, November.
Apple
But
season.
now is the time to be thinking about that. And to your point, having those predictive models, having those generative forecasts based on data that you believe in and can trust, accuracy is never perfect. My first gig at Cisco Systems, I was a demand planning and learned a lot about how to do that forecasting stuff. And the one thing I can tell you is you're never going to be right, but at least you can be more accurate.
That makes a lot of sense because you have to think about depreciation of the asset over the coming time. I mean, Apple season coming up in the fall, it's June right now. If you're sitting on inventory, how much depreciation are you going to see and how long is it going to take? Is it going to be days, weeks, months, right? And that may affect your buying decisions before those devices come out because we all know the prices are going to drop when the new ones launch.
Yeah, well, and not to go too geeky on it,
Yeah, I
right?
don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but
But-
that data eventually becomes a marketing tool as well, right?
Yeah.
So if you know September, October, November, right, Apple season, you start in June, July, you now have a 90-day runway, right, before that first pre-order hits to be able to drive the outcomes you want, right? Because you already have the prior data, right? So now if you have the predictive data, now you're using it as a marketing tool to capture more opportunities when you know in real time that people are going to go buy the new iPhone, right? Whether we're going to fight it or not, it's going to happen, right? So I look at the predictive data almost as not only molding your company, but how can you drive opportunities to, yet again, increase revenue and things like that.
Yeah, again, I don't want to totally geek out, right? But let's think about iPhones back, as far as iPhone 6 and 7. What Apple announces drives a lot of that valuation, right? And unfortunately, it's not really consistent from year to year. But, if the iPhone 16 comes out and the processor is enhanced, but they didn't increase the speed, or there's some new feature, but they didn't change the price, that's going to have an effect on the secondhand market. When you see going 100% eSIM, that had an effect on the market. There's things that Apple will do that you can't see in advance. Even when I was at Apple, I only had very limited visibility to the MPI and what's coming. But those predictive models, and you go back over 10, 11 years and look at how the prices behaved, you could start to figure out, when we talked about kind of validating assumptions, what Apple announces, how they set their pricing, how they introduce new devices, absolutely affects the value of the phones that we're all working with in the secondhand market. And so a predictive model at least will get you in the ballpark so you know what to look for and you can react quickly.
well, it's a very practical use of data.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Any other questions here? Let me bring you the mic.
I can yell. Hey, how concerned are you with? Oh, use my phone. How concerned are you with machine learning and predictive modeling becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? Right. Like when you think about all these things that's going to predict the future, are we just falling into that trap where the market may have corrected itself in different ways? Are you concerned about that at all?
I mean, that's the reality. The reality is you can make your predictions. You can't take your eyes off of it, right? There's no set and forget kind of thing. And this is business, right? So it's never going to be set and forget. I think to your point, and even back to the conversation we just had about pricing, you make your prediction, but you have to be able to react to it, right? So you come in, and again, the thing I can tell you about forecasting is it's never going to be perfect. So you need to make sure that you've got eyes on. And that's where, we talk about kind of automating everything. The robots won't take over the world. You still need a human to be able to look at it and say, I made those assumptions. This is what the machine learning is telling me, or the artificial intelligence, whatever it is. Do I believe it? I trust it until I don't. And you have to have some agility still baked in. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. As a guy who cares about residual value in the marketplace, I'm always looking at this to watch the data and see how it moves.
Yeah.
But I do feel like a lot of times we're used to the standard Sean put up on the slide, the standard 2% per month depreciation. And I feel like sometimes the market may want to do something different, but I worry that we are applying that data in such a way that we're forcing the outcome rather than allowing an actual statement to occur. Just my favorite.
It's a good point. I mean, we all look at those curves and they're not perfect, right? They're like this, right? And interesting point, and I think you could probably resonate with this. It is in fact a supply and demand market, right? When you're supply constrained, the prices go up. If you're demand constrained, the prices go down, right? Like it is a living and breathing marketplace, and you do have to be able to react to it. And you are going to see things in your forecasts that don't make sense. But again, the better the data you have, the less assumptions, more data driven that those assumptions are, the faster you'll be able to understand what it is and react to it from a business perspective.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I look at this and think data helps de-risk the proposition. The more you know, the less mistakes you're likely to make, right?
Yep. And I mean, again, it doesn't mean you're going to be right every time.
No.
But early bird gets the worm.
Mm-hmm.
The faster you figure it out,
Yeah.
the faster you'll be able to make an adjustment.
The fewer mistakes you make, the better off you are.
Fair enough.
I've been joking for years and saying I don't like to repeat mistakes because there's so many new ones waiting to be made, right? So, all right. Any other questions? All right. Well, let's give it up for our speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you.